Okay. Hi, welcome to our fourth summer webinar. This session is on Password Manager, which is open source software which you can use to interface with Active Directory. I'm Diane Dunlap, and I have my coworker John Wharf here with me. The reason why I became interested in this product is I'm involved with Zscaler as well as Google a little bit, both of which can be tied in with Active Directory accounts. And I was working with an LEA, this is a new turn-up last summer of Zscaler, where authentication was on for less than a week. And they turned off authentication because the teachers were all forgetting their passwords, and it was bothering the IT folks. And it dawned on me, if the situation is this bad with the teachers, how would they ever deal with the students? I certainly wouldn't want a gazillion people aggravating me about accounts and passwords. So I did some research and discovered this open source password management software. Okay, so here's what we're going to be discussing today. What Password Manager does, the pieces of Password Manager, interaction with Google and Zscaler, and security, and if we have time, the next version, which is 1.8. The version we'll be looking at is 1.7 live in the lab. The original software runs on Linux. I've had it working on both Ubuntu and CentOS. And today's demo will be on CentOS, but it won't be obvious that it's CentOS because it's a GUI. Once you have it installed and configured, you really don't have to get into Linux. Password Manager is related to a commercial product called NetIQ. In fact, the 1.8 version, which I will show if we have time, has references in the UI to NetIQ. And as you can see, the developers do nightly builds of the software. The installation instructions I started with were for Ubuntu, and I'm listing them here. They were pretty good, but I had some issues with the connector code. So I will be posting updated instructions for Ubuntu at some point. But I have created pretty detailed instructions for getting this going on CentOS. I have a VM image that you can just park on your VMware setup for testing purposes, though I will have to remove my user-specific information and come up with installation instructions. And that would be for 1.7 and 1.8. The pieces of Password Manager are MySQL for storage, Tomcat, which would be a web server, the code itself, and then, of course, an Active Directory server to query. So conceptually, what does Password Manager do? It sits in our Linux box and talks to the Active Directory server. So our users, who are over to the left, communicate with Password Manager, and it's port 8080 if unencrypted and port 8443 if encrypted. Then the Password Manager box talks to Active Directory. And again, it's port 389 if unencrypted and port 636 if encrypted. Who the users would be on the left side would depend on which Password Manager modules you decided to enable. If you decided to enable only username lookups and give just a few people password reset abilities, those would be the only users who would need to access it. So instead of seeing these gobs of users, it might just be a couple of users over on the left side. So what are the Password Manager modules that we're talking about? What can this software do for us? Well, we're going to go through the 9 modules, which I've organized in order of what I thought their usefulness would be, and we'll be doing a live demo of each module. So the first of the 9 modules, the first 2, could be used by administrative staff, say the media coordinator, school secretary, school resource officer, or any group of administrative or teacher type folks. These are the ones that would keep folks from aggravating the IT department, so you could kind of spread out responsibility. The first, people search, is informational. In other words, read only, to determine the presence or absence of an Active Directory account and attributes. The second, Helpdesk, starts with the functionality of people search, but gives designated folks the ability to reset users' Active Directory passwords. The third, Change Password, gives users the ability to change their own Active Directory passwords, providing they know the original passwords. So if you were going to do things like provision students at the beginning of the year, use PowerShell, Visual Basic Script, whatever, to put them into Active Directory, gave the students their passwords, or had deterministic passwords that you were giving them offline, then they could use change password to make the password something that they wanted them to be. The fourth, forgotten password, gives users the ability to change their own Active Directory passwords when they do not know the original password, if they have previously answered 4 secret questions. And I think a lot of folks have gone to websites where they've established accounts, maybe a credit card website, a banking website, whatever. You might have to answer questions about what's your favorite color, your mother's maiden name, what street did you grow up on, that kind of thing. The idea being, if you forgot your password, you wouldn't have to be contacting the help desk. Or you might, and the help desk could just look up your answers. But that's kind of the idea here with this software. The fifth one, forgotten username, gives users the ability to figure out their Active Directory names, provided they know their email or any other attribute in their Active Directory account. And that also is read-only. The sixth one, update profile, gives users the ability to update designated attributes in their own Active Directory accounts. The seventh, guest registration, gives administrators the ability to register guests in Active Directory. The eighth is activate account, and I have down user activation, but it actually in the software calls it activate account. Allows users to activate Active Directory accounts without a password under certain conditions. And the last, new user registration, gives users the ability to set up their own accounts in Active Directory. Some of these are kind of on out there, and as I say, I arranged these from what I thought was most to least useful. Okay, these next two screens kind of summarize who would typically use the modules, whether or not a database is needed, and if the modules involve email. And we'll talk about these options after I demonstrate the modules on our lab system. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get into our lab system to look at Password Manager and what it does. And as you can see, I have an Active Directory machine here. You should be able to see my remote desktop. I'll make it a little bit bigger here. And we're going to be using the LDP command to look at our users in our Active Directory. And this is 2008 server. The software interface is fine with 2008 or 2012. Doesn't really make a difference. This happens to be 2008. And I'm going to do the LDP command on our machine, which is 10.11.24. I'm going to go into connection bind and take the defaults, and then do view tree, take the defaults. And some folks might recognize this DPSNC, might think it's Durham Public Schools. It's really not. It's Diane's Public School. I can't recall. I set this up years ago. I don't remember why I used that. But okay. And you can see where we have our test users, test teachers set up in this OU called Password Manager. And we've populated the Active Directory with just a bunch of test users. Okay. And that is our Active Directory. So we're going to go ahead and go into our password self-service right here. And our password self-service software is running on 10.1.1.45, and I'm going to log in as administrator. You don't have to log in as administrator. We will look at some of the settings later. And as you can see, we have a lot of options even on the main screen before I log in. And after I log in, there'll be even more. Okay. There are 9 modules. You probably wouldn't have all the modules enabled, but we do have all the modules enabled for this demonstration. So let's go ahead and look at the first module, which is people search. Okay. And you can tell Password Manager what your query will be. In other words, do you want people to search for email, last name, first name, or whatever? In this case, we chose the default, which is a fairly broad query. And we're going to look for a user who thinks his name is Scott. Okay. And yeah, so it pulled up SCO, Young Scooter, Travis Scott, and so on, and a bunch of other users that had SCO somewhere in their username. If you're wondering how I came up with these test users, I started out with a screen scrape and parse of famous people, but there are only 100 famous people. And then I found a website with a listing of famous rap artists. So perhaps not famous to people such as myself, but for Active Directory testing, I hit the jackpot. So that's why I have such crazy looking usernames in here. And we'll go ahead and choose one of them. You've got your initial screen on this, and then you've got your expanded attributes. So in our expanded attributes, they have some things that were not on our initial screen. So when would we use this? Well, for your basic scenario, when a student comes up and maybe can remember their password but not their username or email, does a user exist at all? Like if it's a new student in school, have they been put in Active Directory? Or if you need to know what OU they're in or what Active Directory security group they're in. Say in Zscaler, people in the high school student security group can use Facebook, but not ones in the middle school group. You would need to know what security group they were in. If a teacher wanted to do some basic troubleshooting to figure out why there was a problem with a student. If there was a problem syncing the user to the correct Google group, where there was a mapping in Google to Active Directory, this kind of information would be useful. And you can configure what attributes you would pull out. Okay, so I'm going to hit cancel on that. That was people search, so on to Helpdesk. And we're going to look for a username here. Okay. Okay. So our student has come up to the help desk and he has no idea what his name is, what his password is, or whatever. This particular user is Big Cootie. Okay. So we're going to go in and choose Big Cootie, and as you can see, there are attributes in addition to the ones we saw on the initial screen. It's pulling up pretty much everything from Active Directory. And since he has no idea what his original password is and he didn't answer the 4 questions to begin with, we're going to have to do a help desk reset with him. So we're going to do change password for Big Cootie. And as you can see, there are different options here. We can either auto-generate a new password, or we can let Big Cootie choose his own password. This is configurable. If we do auto-generation, passwords are pretty good. I mean, it's taking a base word and adding an additional character to it. So it would be something you could probably live with there. Okay, so I'm gonna let Big Cootie choose his own password here. So. And of course, if you have Active Directory policies in place, these would have to meet your policies, okay? And that worked, okay? And at this point, we will do cancel, and we will log out, okay? So that's our basic help desk functionality. In that module, it also sends email to the person whose password gets changed. So if someone other than Big Cootie comes up and claims to be Big Cootie, and the help desk person gets it wrong, then, well, that was interesting. Okay, the help desk person gets it wrong. Big Cootie is going to get an email if the email field is populated in Active Directory for their account. So whether it's an imposter or whatever, the users will get email on password changes. Okay, so we logged out as administrator, and the module we're going to look at now is change password. So we know what Big Cootie's password is because we just changed it, but maybe he gets to school the next day and decides he didn't like that password after all, or one of his enemies is threatening to hack his account or whatever. When he goes into the change password functionality, it's going to ask him for answers to the 4 questions because he's never answered the 4 questions before. So I'm going to answer the questions as I would answer them. And let's see, favorite teacher. Take a minute. All right, and item from the list. Partners. Name, another item from the list. Favorite food. Yeah. Okay, so I answered the questions, saved responses. Okay, so now the Big Cootie's got his responses in. He's going to continue. He can go in and change password himself. Continue. Okay, he's going to find his password of the day. Okay, change password. Okay. And it usually doesn't take, well, I've never seen it take several minutes. I know it says it's going to take several minutes, but it's thinking about it here. Okay, and those, okay, there we go. I'm on across a VPN to my house, actually. It's not really a lab, it's just I have it at my house. It's taking a while here. All right, so it logs him out automatically. We're going to go back to the main screen. And again, the user would get an email because they changed their password. Whether they changed it themselves, Helpdesk changes it, or whatever, it has gotten changed. Okay, and that would work well, as I said, for the beginning of the year scenario where students are given specific out-of-band passwords, or you could email them their new passwords, figure out some other way of distributing them. It would allow the students to come up with more user-friendly passwords that they can remember. And at the same time, they would be setting up recovery questions if they forgot those passwords in the future. Okay? So let's look at the next module, which is forgotten password. So Big Cootie comes in the next day. He's had a bad night, and he is going to, he's just forgotten his password totally. And his last name. Now, all my emails are the same because I was testing with email. Everybody is PWM test at K-12 gaps and so on. In real life, that wouldn't be the case, okay? Now, Big Cootie just answered these questions, so let's see, partner's nickname. Okay, so he got in because he knew the answer to 2 of the 4 questions. Let's see, I'm running out of passwords to use here. But I think this is our last.
So Diane, got a question here. When you change your password, does the application show what the current password requirements are? Because I know you talked about the password requirements.
Yeah.
Does it show what they are?
It does in places. Yeah. I'll show that in a second.
Okay.
Yeah. Continue. I'm logged out. I'm not sure if it does on that screen, but it does somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we have one other question that's come out on the floor. Got a district that has been searching for a method of registering guests and visitors, but they want to register them into AD so that they can require authentication to access public SSID.
Yeah.
Can the new user registration model be configured to create time-limited and or self-destructing AD objects?
Yeah, it can be. Now, I just find it twitchy. I'll show the capabilities of that. I'm not wild about the way it works, but it does work. Let me think now.
Sorry to
Yeah,
get you
yeah, no problem.
bit.
Okay, no
So
problem.
those two
Uh-huh.
items, I know
Okay. Okay.
James
All right.
and Eugene
Now,
had asked, so they
okay.
will be coming up
Yep.
here in just a few minutes.
All right. Now, this is account information for this password policy. Okay. Yeah. So, if you're logged in, you can look at the password requirements. Now, do they appear on that screen? It's being that it's open source. I think we could probably get it to appear on the password requirement screen, but it is at least here. Okay, where once we're logged in, we can look at account information and the password policy, which it's pulling from Active Directory. Okay. And yeah, we're going to look at the guest registration thing in a minute. Okay. All right. So, forgotten username. I'm going to log out and then go into forgotten username. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to enter a user which I know exists in Active Directory. Do a search. Okay. My last name is the kid, and as you can see, my username is Sid the kid. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. You could put it so that if they knew their email, then it would pull up their username. If they knew whatever, it could pull up their username, that kind of thing. But let's look for a different forgotten username at this point. Let's look for Smith, which is the last name. And as you can see, when we look for Smith, it's getting an error. In other words, multiple user matches found. Okay, so whatever you're searching for has to be unique, otherwise you're going to get an error. Now, if everybody had a unique email, it would be unique and it wouldn't be a problem. So if you had something crazy going on, like your email was numeric and your usernames were alphabetic or some sort of strange mapping, this could be useful. But as far as letting students being able to look for all the Smiths at the site, I could see why that's not a really great idea. If you needed for people to be able to do that, you could use the people search module instead. Okay. With high school kids, are they doing genealogical research for Smith relatives, or is there some sort of more nefarious scheme going on to pull up all the Smiths or all the Susies or whatever? Okay, so I'm going to hit cancel on that. And another interesting one is update profile. Let me see if I can get in here. I can remember what I changed his password to for the umpteenth time. Okay, log in. Yes, I did. Okay, so Big Cootie logged in, and he wants to do update profile here. And again, this is very configurable to say what we want for people to be able to look up. Might be more useful for teachers than for students because, I don't know, maybe you're wanting to track teachers' home phone numbers, that kind of thing. They can put their phone number in. As you know, there's no license plate information in Active Directory, but I repurposed a field, which is the fax number field. Big Cootie doesn't have a fax, so I just repurposed that field, and you can do a mapping in this software. So I'm just going to put ABC 1234 for his license plate number. I guess if it was a scenario where parking was at a premium and you needed to do a one-to-one mapping between license plate numbers and students, you might want to use this kind of thing. If you wanted to maybe do MAC authentication and have users register their MAC addresses to Active Directory, you could do this. That would be a little more involved because then you'd have to get the MACs out of Active Directory, use maybe a PowerShell script or a Visual Basic script, then to put them in Active Directory as separate accounts. Okay, so I was kind of thinking out of the box there, but all right, so continue here. All right, so we're going to look at guest registration and let's see, log out. You have to be logged in as an administrator to do guest registration, but I'll also show new user setup. Okay. And as I said, right now all my users are administrators because that's what I have them set up. So let's do register guest user. And I guess I'll register myself. And since we have kind of a wrapper theme here, I'll be Big D. My first name will be Big. My last name will be D. And my email address, I'm going to make it the same as it has been for all the other ones, k12gaps.mcnc.org. Telephone number. Okay, and then we can set up an expiration date here. Maximum is 30 days, but being open source, I think you could change it. And you do have to actually have to choose something there, and we just hit create at that point. Okay, it's been created, and we hit continue. Okay, so the weird thing though about guest registration, and I have not really seen any way around this. You saw where we registered a guest, and let's see. Okay, yeah. We registered a guest and it sent an email to the new user, and my username is Big D, my last name is D. I can change my password if I wanted, and I set it so that it would do a randomly generated password. I could have made it so the user or the administrator could have set a password of the user's choice. But look at the username, this crazy username that starts with a $sign. That username will work. So if you do your guest registration, that absolutely will work. They can get into whatever it is they need to do, a captive portal, and the password will work. But to me, this just wasn't very user friendly. And I couldn't come up with any way around it. I tried doing a post provisioning change to make it the same account name, and so on. I just, yeah, couldn't get it to work. So that's how it works. If you wanted to do a limited time guest, I guess there would be no problem in a person going into their smartphone, into their email, and then just doing a screen scrape of this into the captive portal. It would work. It just wasn't the way I would like for it to work. So that is guest registration. Okay. I guess maybe one of the reasons why they don't have it working the way I would like it to work is because if you had a user coming in and they were John Smith, you might have a bunch of John Smiths already in the LEA, like a John Smith 1, John Smith 2, and so on. Guest tries to register as John Smith, and that's not going to work. Okay? Maybe that's why they've done it the way they've done it. Okay? So let's go ahead. We're going to log out, and then we're going to look at user registration. User registration, I think that would work for, I keep putting that quote in there. All right. Okay. I'm sorry, activate account. Okay, so here's activate account. An activate account will work if an account has never been activated before. If there's a field in Active Directory, it says login equals 0. If login equals 0, then the account is eligible for activation. So we're going to go ahead and activate one. I think this one exists. If not, we will look in, let's see, choose activate. It's been successfully activated. Okay, so activated account Big Debbie. As you saw, it wasn't requiring a new password, but now it is requiring a password. Okay, but Big Debbie didn't need to know her password to begin with in order to activate her account. Now, I have seen LEAs where at the beginning of the year, they make all the passwords the same thing, and then the kids change them later, I guess. Okay. So this is the same kind of thing. If you gave all the kids the same password to begin with, then yes, they can go in and activate account. It is making Big Debbie's password the one that she wants it to be. And it's thinking about it. In a little bit, it should come up with asking for the answers to the secret questions for this user. Okay, continue. All right. Now, at this point, Big Debbie could bail and not answer the 4 questions, in which case she'd have to use some other mechanism of password reset, which might involve going to the help desk, but we're trying to encourage these folks to do self-service. So, all right, that's my favorite team. Let's see, favorite shows a child. I'll go ahead and fill these out. Favorite food. select an item from the list, favorite vehicle. Okay. Okay. So Big W's answered all the questions. She's good. It logged her out. So basically that is activate user. Okay. And the very last is new user registration. This was kind of the strange one. I just really couldn't see wanting to do this. Let's see, since I've got my coworker John here with me, and we've got this wrapper theme going on, I'm going to put, let's see, Google Ninja. That's going to be his new account. Again, his email is going to be the same as any of the others. His new password. And on this one, instead of allowing it to do random generation, I'm letting the users choose their own passwords. So he's going to be Google Ninja. Okay. Now, the registration business worked. And let me see. A lot of this stuff is going to spam. I think if we redid the email so it looked like it wasn't coming from a machine, it wouldn't go to spam, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. We can see where the registration worked. He can go to click here to actually complete the process, but we're going to choose his special code. Click here. Account is being configured. I think it's going to ask me to paste that mess in here. Yeah, and continue. Okay. Yeah, and then it goes through the same drill. It asks our Google Ninja for his 4 answers to the secret questions, and he's registered. But the same problem with new user registration as guest registration, and I probably should have done the email so it would actually send him that whacked out username that starts with a $sign, but he does now have a whacked out username that starts with a $sign, okay, for the new user registration. So it's kind of the same drill as with the guest user registration, that it's not very user friendly. Okay. So I couldn't envision that being used at an LEA, where the students are threatening to take over anyhow, allowing them to register their own accounts in Active Directory. Those are all the password manager modules. So let's talk about the database. Let me see. Okay. We saw how a number of times the users had to answer 4 questions. And this information is getting stored somewhere. It can be stored in Oracle with version 1.8 of Password Manager. In the current version, it can be stored in MySQL, and it can also be stored in MySQL in 1.8, or it can use Active Directory schema extensions. I put expansions, sub extensions here. Because as you know, in Active Directory, there is no field for mother's maiden name, license plate number, street you grew up in, that kind of thing. So if you're going to store the information in Active Directory, you would have to extend the schema, okay? There are advantages and disadvantages of having to extend the schema in Active Directory. Now, the developers of this software do encourage folks to use Active Directory schema extensions. But if you're going to do that, you would need to replicate the extensions to whatever Active Directory boxes you had. You would have to retain them on an upgrade or patches, Security was kind of debatable. Is Active Directory more secure than Linux or vice versa? That's kind of a religious discussion there. One advantage of Active Directory is it's not open source. And it would be a single point of failure in terms of your storage of your users, because you're storing your Active Directory information and your 4 questions in the same area. Okay. As far as using the MySQL or Oracle storage instead, you wouldn't have to do the Active Directory schema extensions. Maybe it's more secure, maybe it's not. It's open source. It could be a plus or a minus. And it would be a second point of failure instead of putting all your eggs in one basket. Okay. So we'll go ahead and look at the storage of the 4 questions in the database. And I do not have a root password on my MySQL. Normally you would, okay? So this is where we're storing our user responses. Here we're going to say use password manager. We're going to say, let's see, show tables. And the actual table where the responses are saved is PWM underscore responses. So we're going to do select star from PWM responses. Okay. And you can see where there are 61 people have answered the 4 questions. And if we go on up there, we can see bits and pieces of the questions like, let's see, who is your favorite author? Okay. But when we look at the answer to who is your favorite author, we see it pretty much looks like gibberish. And it is encrypted there. Okay. Could this be decrypted if the system was hacked? I really don't know. I mean, I have not tried to hack the system to see how much danger there would be in storing this in open source software, but it is encrypted. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to go back into Password Manager in my Chrome. And we're going to look at some of the configuration parameters here. I didn't want that. Let's see, got too many windows open here. Okay. So our password self-search, you see how at the top where it has use configuration manager. And let me go ahead and get out of this new user thing. And I didn't want that. Let me do an incognito window to clear that out. Okay, you see how there's a configuration manager up here at the top. And you saw how all the users could see that. And you're normally not going to have the configuration open so that all users can see that. But right now it is. And you can see if we decided we had everything configured we wanted to have configured, we would hit the close configuration button down here. Okay. But right now we're not going to do that. It actually stores the configuration in a flat file on disk. And if you want to reopen the configuration because you messed something up, you go to the flat file on disk and you change a flag in there. But we're going to go in the configuration editor here, do PWM, hit login. And the modules that you would enable or disable are right here. Okay, and we're going to look briefly at people search. You see that people search, just as an example, it's enabled. And the people search query match, that's who can see people search. Okay. The search filter are the parameters we're searching on. Do we want to look at their last name, their email, whatever? The search base is what part of the tree we want to look at. The initial results they return are the people search result form. Then when you expand one of those users, it would be the people search detail form there. Okay. And then I think down at the bottom we have the people search result limit. Yeah, I don't remember if that's number per query or just number per screen. But that's just an example of a module. All of them look pretty much the same. Okay. We saw email and how email worked. You can customize your email so that you can send users specific emails. Let's see, view advanced settings, okay. And within email, it's a security thing. You can also send out alerts to the administrator. So if somebody's trying to hack into the box, or if the box crashes, the Tomcat gets recycled or whatever, I will get an email, as you can see there, okay. And what I meant on a lot of the stuff going to spam when the users get it, especially in the new user registration or possibly password change and so on, if we made this more user-friendly in terms of what these emails look like, it would be less likely to go to spam. I just haven't changed it a whole lot. I changed one of the guest ones, but that was about it, okay. But this is where we can make it more user-friendly so that it wouldn't go to spam. Okay. So that would be some of our configuration parameters. And we're going to look at, let's see, interaction with Google. and Zscaler. Okay, so since Zscaler by default syncs user accounts only daily, but it could more often, if you're using password managers to actually create guests or user accounts, those would activate at the time of the sync in Zscaler. But any password changes to existing accounts would be picked up immediately by Zscaler. As far as the interaction with Google, that would depend on how you're using Google. If you're not syncing Active Directory accounts with Google at all, then the Password Manager Active Directory interaction would not affect Google. If folks are syncing passwords between Active Directory and Google, we typically see this done in one of two ways. Either by gaps, so Google Active Directory password sync, or sometimes use of the Alt Security Identity field. If you are using gaps, the DLL that is installed in the Active Directory box that monitors the password changing process should see the changes that users or administrators make through Password Manager. We've not tried this, but basically an Active Directory password change is an Active Directory password change. If you're using the Alt Security Identity field instead, the Password Manager Change Password module can include post-change processing commands to tell it to set the Alt Security Identities field to match the encrypted password field. You shouldn't do this if you're using gaps. There would be no need to. But if you are using the Alt Security Identities field method of syncing to Google, that would be an option with Password Manager. Okay? And last but not least, security. As you've seen, there are 9 modules within Password Manager, and you can enable one or all of them. If you were only allowing a few folks to perform PeopleSearch or Helpdesk, you wouldn't have all of this traffic to the box. You wouldn't even need to allow network traffic to Password Manager if all that it was going to do was sit on the librarian's desk. And as with any software, you should enable only what you need to use and only allow folks to do what is absolutely necessary for their jobs. Since we have installed this software on CentOS, it does use IP tables to protect the system at a port level, but you would probably want to have access lists on infrastructure equipment outside the Password Manager box. You would want to limit physical access to the Password Manager box. So if a student can walk in, power the system down, and take it home to hack into it at their leisure and bring it back the next day, you would have a problem. The operating system which it is running on has logs, and the software itself also has some intruder alert functionality. It's under Settings, Security, and Email. And we looked at that. It comes out and it will say alert notification if there's any funny business going on in Password Manager. And we saw how many of the modules were tied in with email, so that if there were a problem with an individual user account getting hacked, users would be notified if there was any kind of funny business going on with individual accounts. Okay, so as I mentioned, we've been using Password Manager 1.7. 1.8 is out. In 1.8, there is more profile granularity. It looks like in 1.8, which I've not played with a whole lot, you could do something like, say, high school teachers can control high school students, elementary school students can control, elementary school teachers can control elementary school students, that kind of thing. There is increased security in that they're requiring longer answers to the questions. The interface has changed, and it runs on Windows, which, well, it also runs on Linux too. But I mean, I don't know. Might be a good thing, might be a bad thing that it runs on Windows. But if you're a real Windows person, I have not tried it. It supposedly runs on Windows. Okay, so that is open source Password Manager in action. We're about out of time. Got a few minutes left. I can entertain questions. If folks would like to look at other menu options or the Password Manager 1.8 I have set up, I can show that. I'm going to go ahead and bring up 1.8 so we can look at that. Let's see, where's my 1.8? I don't have on the 1.8 in the lab the secure at this point. Haven't enabled that. Okay, yeah, it's complaining about. Yeah, it's not secure. Okay, it's a self-signed password. The interface just looks a little bit different. It's a little bit cleaner. Okay, and as you can see, the modules are just laid out differently in the 1.8. The configuration editor in here, it's a little different. It didn't like my 3-character password, unlike in the other one that I've been using, the sign in. And just got some more options here. I really haven't had a chance to play with them. Tokens, SMS, they've changed CAPTCHAs and so on. Just a bunch more stuff here than they had in the old version. In the people search, this is what I meant about having different profiles depending on the school. You know, you could say, I want to add another profile in here, add a filter, and then it comes up with a second profile. So we could say middle school teachers can control middle school students, that kind of thing. It appears to be that's how it works, but I really have not played with 1.8 very much. Also, if anybody would like to test my script, I have 1,000 nice users. If you would like my CSV file of users, if you were going to set up a test active directory, I can provide that. I can also provide the PowerShell scripts. PowerShell script is a little different for 2012 than it was for 2008, but that was more of an Active Directory issue than it was a password manager issue.
Now, with those things, we can get those published out on the site and everything as well. If you guys are interested, the slides will be posted as well as the video will be posted this afternoon to the CNE webinar site, www.mcnc.org/CNE-webinars. We will have them posted there, and we'll email out if you've registered to go in and fill out the evaluation. With the evaluation, we'll send out some additional information, things along those lines. So we will have the slides to go up online for you guys to take advantage of as well. Now, one of the things with Diane's piece here is you don't have to have a very beefy machine, correct?
No.
It can be about any type of machine that you want to put it on, or a VM or Hyper-V solution. Now, next week, if you're attending next week's session, we'll be talking about how banana pies, raspberry pies, whatever the type whatever flavor you want to use, can be used not just with this, but with some other solutions as well. We'll be talking about in next week's webinar. But you could have this run on a Raspberry Pi, or you could also have it running on a virtual machine as well.
Yeah, I think my home machine, I think the one we've been looking at is only 4 gig of RAM. It's not a server. I've got another one that's in a VM, that's 16 gig, but it's only using a piece because it's a VM. Really minor storage.
And if you're interested in getting some assistance getting it set up, just reach out to Diane. She's available, or whoever, and we can see about getting you some help getting it set up as well. We don't have a webinar on the fake Windows directory, do we? That you've been working on.
Oh, I can do that. I mean, like,
we may add another webinar later on.
Yeah, if people want to know how to do a test, adding a bunch of test users or using PowerShell for that or something like that. Yeah, we could do that. Also, I mean, if there's a particular direction that folks want to go in with this software, like maybe you want to be able to use PowerShell or Visual Basic to dump the kids in come August and then use this. I mean, yeah, you could set up an AD and we could get this going before August and you'd be ready to go. Or maybe there's just a direction that people want to go in with this software that we haven't thought of. Maybe it would do it, maybe it wouldn't.
Got a question here. Does 1.8 fix some of the quirkiness with that we saw
Oh,
in
okay. That's a good question. Yeah, I think the quirkiness in 1.7 is I kept hitting the double quote. I think it was operator error on that one. Yeah, it doesn't handle the back button. And frankly, the 1.7, I think it's like 2-year-old software. It's getting kind of long in the tooth now. And of course, your browser support, you add additional browsers. Yeah, but the 1.8, it has a nightly build. So if there's any quirkiness or bugs, it will be fixed in the 1.8. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, you see there we have the webinar links there, mcnc/cne dash webinars. You'll be able to get all the webinars there today. We'll have the slides as well as the video from today's presentation up on there for you to take advantage of. So Diane, with the 1.8, is
Mm-hmm.
it an update or do you have to have a fresh install?
It's a fresh install. Yeah. I mean, I have not tried an update, but it basically is taking a WAR file and putting it in Tomcat 7 web apps directory. Okay. It would replace the old WAR file.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's going to replace it
It
and
would replace it.
possibly update
Uh,
into some new things as well. Then.
Yeah, now that's a question. What I'm not sure on, and I have not tried. If if I had the answers to the 4 questions, maybe that's the concern. If I had the answers to the 4 questions in 1.7, could 1.8 add to MySQL, and would the schema be the same? I think it would. I've got them running on 2 different boxes. If you have Password Manager 1.7 and are concerned about upgrading to 1.8, I can test that in the lab. But, my thinking is most folks probably wouldn't be doing that. Yeah.
So just a little piece on that. Currently in our install, then we've installed 1.7, and then on a separate box
Yes.
installed 1.8.
Yes. Uh-huh.
1.8 is still relatively new, so we have not done an upgrade
Yeah,
process yet.
up in the past year, it's kind of weird because of the 1.8. If you look at their website, I couldn't even find release notes on the 1.8. It was like they started with 1.7 and on a daily basis, they kept coming out with new ones. And sometime during the year, they said, this is 1.8, So it's just, I don't, there was no nice cutoff for 1.8.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for those on the webinar, just remember this is open source software, so it is a sort of a use at your own risk. MCNC has gone through, tested several things. We've got it working in our environment and are willing to help others to get it up and running in your environment and everything along those lines as well. But it is open source software, so we do, just like you, we assume some risk when we take it and try this new software out. So are there any other questions from the webinar? If not, we greatly appreciate everyone's time. We'll still be here for a few more minutes if you think of a question. Otherwise, we appreciate your time today. If you would please go and fill out a evaluation on the CNE-webinars site so that we can get your feedback. If there's additional webinars that you would like to see, information, whatever the case may be, just let us know.